Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. And today's random review is from 2014, and it's Jodorowsky'S Dune, which is the documentary about one of the greatest films never made, Jodorowsky'S adaptation of the Frank Herbert book Dune, even though he'd never actually read the book before. Jodorowsky, to some, is a genius. To others, he's a charlatan. To some, he's a visionary. To others, he's a peddler of pretentious claptrap. I personally think he's some kind of strange genius. He started in theatre, and then he made his first film, Fando and Liz, in 1967. Then he made El Topo, which is the original midnight movie, the original cult movie. It's the film that John Lennon said should be shown in a museum like 24 hours a day. He then made The Holy Mountain, which is an absolute masterpiece and has arguably the greatest ending in cinema history and the greatest statement on cinema itself. So he then turned his attention to doing an adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune. He hadn't read the book, but a friend of his was a big fan of it. So with typical Jodorowsky gusto, he went to work finding a team of spiritual warriors, because he wanted to make a film that would change cinema and change society. He wanted audiences to have an experience like taking LSD without actually taking LSD. So he didn't want just technicians, he wanted spiritual warriors. And this documentary kind of documents what actually happened, how he got the team together, and how it sadly never actually came to fruition. It features archive interviews with certain members of his team who are no longer with us. It also has Jodorowsky himself, who's now 84, even though, or at the time he's 84, even though he acts somebody like 20 years younger. It also has interviews with Nicholas Winding Refn, who kind of just drops it in the conversation that he was having dinner at Jodorowsky's house one day, or one night, and Jodorowsky brings out his Dune book, which was essentially a shooting script with all the costumes in it, and he then proceeded to essentially tell the story of the film to Winding Refn, who says he's the only one that's actually seen the film because Jodorowsky just described it so well. It also features some nice interview with Richard Stanley, director of Hardware, who of course knows all too well about the studio system and the studio's difficulty with more artistic endeavours rather than financial ones. And if anybody's watched Island of the Lost Souls, about the failed making of his version of the Island of Dr. Moreau, then you know where Richard Stanley's coming from. It's a fascinating film. It's quite sad because you are tinged with this kind of sadness that he never actually got to make it. The film was slated for $15 million, which in 1974 and 1975 was a lot of money, and the studios didn't really trust him on the evidence of El Topo and the Holy Mountain, which, let's be honest, at times aren't the most coherent films in the world. But how he got his cast of characters that he would use on the film is just phenomenal. You've got Moebius, the famous French cartoonist, Dan O'Bannon, he found from watching Dark Star, which was out in 1974. He got H.R. Giger before H.R. Giger was famous, pretty much. He wanted Pink Floyd to do some of the music, and also the band Magma to do music. He tried to get Douglas Trumbull to do the special effects. He, strangely enough, the character that Sting plays in the 1986 film, Jodorowsky originally wanted Mick Jagger to play it. He wanted Salvador Dali as the Emperor of the Universe. He wanted Orson Welles as Baron Harkonnen. He also wanted David Carradine as Duke Atreides. His own son Brontes would play Paul Atreides. And the stories and the anecdotes of how Jodorowsky got these people are just absolutely priceless, and they're generally rather funny and strange. I mean, if you're a fan of Jodorowsky, this is a must buy. It's a Region A, but it is a Blu-ray DVD combo. There's extra deleted scenes. If you're a fan of cinema history, I would certainly recommend it as well. It's funny because when the studios turned him down, the famous, the Dune book, which they gave to every studio, it's funny because they kind of say it must have done the rounds around the studios, because you can see the certain scenes, the influence in Star Wars, Flash Gordon, Raiders of the Lost Ark, so many films that came not that long after the failed Dune project. Obviously Dino De Laurentiis did it in 1986 with David Lynch directing, which Jodorowsky does kind of chortle at because it was such a failure. It is just, again, you are kind of tinged with a bit of sadness because Jodorowsky didn't make it. Because if you're a fan of his work, you can just imagine. I mean, we see the costumes designed by Moebius. You see some of the Baron Harkonnen and the Harkonnen Palace designed by Giger, which are just stunning. But it's funny, after the kind of disillusion of his team, they went off and did other projects. Obviously Dan O'Bannon and Giger would work on Alien with another couple of artists. One of the artists that did the spaceships designed for Dune. So their blueprint is on future things, and of course it was Jodorowsky that kind of brought them together in the first place. So it's a great film as a document of the making of unmaking of what would have been, as they say, it would have almost be impossible to shoot. How they get around Salvador Dali's money demands is quite amusing. It's just an absolute joy. You can still tell that Jodorowsky's bothered by the fact that he never got to make it, but he is a positive person. I could listen to Jodorowsky all day. There is something kind of mesmerising and kind of alluring about him, even when he's talking complete nonsense. So I would highly recommend picking up if you're interested in the making of or the unmaking of films. One day I'll maybe make a top 10 documentaries about the making of films, because sometimes they can be more interesting than the films themselves. I mean, I'm secretly hoping that one day there'll be a making of Neil Marshall's Hellboy, because I'm sure that'll be more interesting than the film when you hear all the stories about the backstabbing that went on. Anyway, I digress. So thanks very much for watching. Let me know if you've seen Jodorowsky's Dune, or if you've seen any other Jodorowsky films and what you think of them. And hopefully we'll see you again for another random review. This is Solitude Rowan saying farewell.